It was a chilly October evening, and the moon hung low in the ink-black sky, casting eerie shadows over the desolate Hollowwood farm. I, Michael, a 17-year-old boy, had heard the whispers about this place all my life. They said it was cursed, haunted by something far more sinister than any tale spun around a campfire. But I never believed in ghosts or curses, at least not until that night. My friend, Jake, had dared me to spend the night at Hollowwood Farm, swearing it was the ultimate test of courage. The stories about the place were disturbing, to say the least. It was said that a family had once lived there, but they vanished one fateful Halloween night, leaving behind a legacy of dread and despair. As I approached the ramshackle farmhouse, my heart raced. The old structure loomed like a decaying beast, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. The wind howled through the empty frames, creating a symphony of eerie moans. I took a deep breath and pushed open the creaky wooden door. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with a musty odor. Cobwebs clung to the corners of the room, and the furniture was draped in tattered sheets, as if someone had tried to protect it from time's relentless march. Jake and I had brought flashlights, and the beams cut through the darkness, revealing the abandoned remnants of a family's life. We explored the ground floor cautiously, our footsteps echoing ominously in the stillness. The kitchen was filled with broken dishes and rotting food, as if the family had fled in the middle of dinner. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As we ascended the creaking staircase, a strange chill ran down my spine. The hallway on the second floor was even more unsettling. The walls were adorned with faded family photos. A mother, a father, and 2 children smiled at us from behind the cracked glass frames. Their eyes seemed to follow us as we moved. We entered a room at the end of the hallway. It must have been a child's bedroom, for there were toys strewn across the floor. But what caught our attention was a journal on the small desk. It was dusty, but the last entry was dated October 31st, 1973. I opened it and began to read. The pages were filled with the ramblings of a tormented soul. The author described strange occurrences, whispers in the night, and an unshakable sense of dread that had consumed the family. They believed that something was living in the walls of the farmhouse, something malevolent that hungered for their fear. Jake scoffed at the journal's contents, dismissing it as the ramblings of a madman. But I couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. As the hours passed, we decided to split up to investigate the rest of the house. I ventured into the attic, while Jake explored the basement. The attic was filled with old furniture and boxes, but what caught my attention was a small, locked door hidden behind a wardrobe. With a sense of dread, I managed to pry the door open. Inside, I found a tiny room, barely large enough to stand in. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and in the center of the room was a small, decrepit crib. I felt a sudden wave of nausea as I realized what it meant. This was the room of the missing child from the family photo. Just then, I heard Jake's panicked voice echoing from the basement. I rushed downstairs to find him pale and trembling. He stammered out a tale of hearing footsteps and whispers in the darkness. He claimed to have seen a shadowy figure moving in the corners of the basement. My skepticism had waned, and I was beginning to feel the weight of the fear that had consumed this place. As we decided to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping us inside. Panic surged through us, and we tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. That's when we heard it, the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter coming from the darkness of the basement. It was accompanied by a chorus of whispers, too indistinct to comprehend. We were frozen in terror as the footsteps grew closer, and the room seemed to grow colder. Suddenly, the basement door swung open, revealing an otherworldly darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. And from within that void emerged a figure, a child with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. It was the missing child from the family photo, and it was anything but human. The creature lunged at us, its unearthly laughter echoing in our ears. We screamed and bolted towards the front door, not daring to look back. We burst out into the cold night, leaving the cursed Hollowwood farm behind us. As we gasped for breath in the safety of the moonlit fields, we knew that we had experienced something beyond explanation. We had dared to venture into the heart of darkness, and we had come face to face with a malevolent force that defied the boundaries of the living world. Hollowwood Farm was no longer just a legend. It was a place of true horror. And as I gazed back at the derelict farmhouse, I knew that some stories were best left untold, and some places were best left unexplored on a dark, disturbing, and spooky night. It was a dark, disturbing, and spooky night, the kind that sent shivers down your spine and made you question the reality of the world. I'd always been a skeptic when it came to the supernatural, dismissing ghost stories as mere folklore and superstition. But one fateful night, my skepticism would be put to the test in a way I could never have imagined. It all began when I inherited Hollowbrook House, an old Victorian mansion nestled deep in the woods of a remote, forgotten town. The house had been in my family for generations, and I had only heard whispered tales of its dark history. As the new owner, I decided to spend a night there to assess its condition before deciding whether to keep or sell it. The night I arrived was unseasonably cold, and a dense fog clung to the trees like a sinister shroud. The sight of the looming mansion sent a chill down my spine. The house was an eerie sight, with its crumbling facade and ivy-covered walls. But I was determined to be rational, believing that my fear was merely a product of the stories I had heard as a child. I entered the house and immediately a musty odor assaulted my senses. The interior was dimly lit, and the wallpaper had peeled away in places, revealing the decaying plaster underneath. I lit a candle and ventured deeper into the house, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As I explored the first floor, I couldn't help but notice the eerie silence that enveloped the place. There were no sounds of creaking wood or the usual settling noises of an old house. It was as if the very air held its breath, waiting for something to happen. I made my way up the creaking staircase to the second floor, where the bedrooms were located. Each room I entered seemed frozen in time, with antique furniture draped in dusty sheets. It was as though the inhabitants had fled in haste, leaving their possessions behind. One room in particular caught my attention. It was a nursery, adorned with faded wallpaper featuring whimsical animals. The crib in the corner was empty, and a child's laughter seemed to linger in the air. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I tried to shake off the unease. I continued my exploration, eventually finding myself in the attic. The attic was a labyrinth of dusty trunks and forgotten relics. As I rummaged through old photographs and yellowed letters, I stumbled upon a journal belonging to my great-grandmother, Eleanor. In the journal, she chronicled her experiences in Hollowbrook House, and the entries grew increasingly disturbing. She spoke of strange whispers in the night, shadowy figures that darted in and out of her vision, and the sensation of being watched constantly. I read with growing unease as she described her descent into madness and her belief that the house was cursed. As I closed the journal, a cold breeze swept through the attic, extinguishing my candle. Panic welled up inside me as I fumbled for my flashlight. In the dim beam of light, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the attic. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the figure seemed to move closer, its form shifting and contorting. The air grew colder, and the figure emitted an unearthly, guttural growl that echoed in my ears. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I turned and bolted down the attic stairs, not daring to look back. I could hear the figure pursuing me, its footsteps echoing loudly in the narrow space. It felt as though the very walls of the house were closing in on me. I reached the second floor and glanced back to see the shadowy figure just a few steps behind me. Its face was obscured, but its malevolence was palpable. I rushed into the nursery and slammed the door shut, desperately searching for something to barricade it. As I pushed a heavy dresser against the door, I heard a chilling whisper in my ear, a voice that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It said my name in a haunting, otherworldly tone. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that whatever haunted Hollowbrook house knew me. Hours passed, and I huddled in the nursery, the room growing colder and colder. The whispers continued, a chorus of ghostly voices that seemed to mock me. I felt as though I were losing my grip on reality, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Morning finally came, and the house grew still once more. With trembling hands, I removed the dresser and cautiously opened the door. The attic was empty, the shadowy figure gone. Hollowbrook house had returned to its eerie silence. I fled the mansion, leaving behind the journal and the dark secrets it contained. I never returned to that accursed place, but the horrors of that night haunted my dreams for years to come. I had witnessed something beyond rational explanation, something that defied the bounds of reality. Hollowbrook house remained abandoned, a foreboding monument to a past that should have remained buried. And as for me, I could never shake the feeling that I had come face to face with a darkness that should never have been awakened, a darkness that still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim on a dark, disturbing, and spooky night. I remember that night as vividly as if it had just happened. It was a dark, disturbing, and spooky night, the kind that sent shivers down your spine. The year was 1997, and I was a 17-year-old boy named Ethan, living with my family in a small town called Hollowbrook. Our town was known for its picturesque landscapes and charming farms, but there was one place that was notorious among the locals: Hollowbrook Farm. The farm had been abandoned for decades, left to rot in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knew why the previous owners had deserted it, but there were whispers of something sinister lurking in the shadows. I was always fascinated by the macabre, so I couldn't resist the temptation to explore the place with my friends, Sam and Lily. It was a chilly October night when we decided to visit Hollowbrook Farm. The moon was hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, casting an eerie darkness over the desolate landscape. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, we crossed the creaky wooden bridge that led to the farm. The first thing that struck me was the eerie silence that enveloped the farm. There were no crickets chirping, no owls hooting, just an unsettling quiet. The house itself was a decrepit two-story structure, with broken windows and peeling paint. It looked like it had seen better days. As we entered the house, our flashlights revealed a scene that sent shivers down our spines. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, as if someone had left in a hurry. The air was heavy with a musty odor, and cobwebs clung to every corner. We cautiously made our way through the house, our footsteps echoing ominously. In the living room, we discovered a collection of old photographs scattered on the floor. They depicted a happy family, posing in front of the very house we were in. The parents, 2 children, and a dog, all wearing smiles that now felt hauntingly out of place. Sam picked up a photograph and muttered, "This place gives me the creeps. Let's get out of here." But our curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to explore further. The kitchen was a mess of broken dishes and rotting food. In the dining room, we found a table set for a meal, as if the family had abruptly abandoned it mid-dinner. It was as if time had frozen in this place. Lily, always the bravest among us, suggested we check the upstairs. As we climbed the creaky wooden stairs, the feeling of dread grew stronger. Each step seemed to echo with whispers of the past. The second floor was even more decrepit than the first, with doors hanging off their hinges and wallpaper peeling like old skin. We entered what appeared to be the children's bedroom. Toys were strewn across the floor, and a faded poster of a smiling clown adorned one wall. Sam picked up an old teddy bear and held it up, his voice trembling as he said, "This place is seriously messed up." As we were about to leave the room, I noticed something peculiar: a trapdoor beneath a worn-out rug. The air in the room seemed to grow colder, and I felt a strange compulsion to lift the rug. With a hesitant pull, the trapdoor revealed a hidden staircase leading down into darkness. Curiosity overtook our fear, and we descended into the inky blackness. Our flashlights illuminated a narrow, damp tunnel. The air was heavy with the smell of earth, and the walls seemed to close in on us as we moved deeper into the abyss. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a chamber bathed in an eerie greenish light. In the center of the room was an old, ornate mirror that seemed to radiate malevolence. Our reflections stared back at us, twisted and distorted, with hollow eyes that sent chills down our spines. As we gazed into the mirror, the room seemed to come alive with whispers and shadows. The voices of children echoed in the chamber, faint cries for help that sent terror coursing through our veins. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. Panicking, we turned to leave, but the entrance had vanished, leaving us trapped in this nightmarish place. We tried to call for help, but our voices were swallowed by the darkness. Time lost all meaning as we wandered through the twisted labyrinth of tunnels, tormented by the haunting voices and malevolent shadows. I can't say how long we were trapped down there, but it felt like an eternity. It was Lily who finally broke the curse of that mirror. With a desperate scream, she smashed it to pieces, shattering the greenish light and dispelling the voices. The room around us crumbled, and we were thrown back into the tunnels. When we awoke, we were back in the decaying farmhouse, covered in dirt and bruises. The trapdoor was gone, and the mirror was nothing but shards on the floor. It was as if the horrors we had experienced had never happened. We ran out of that cursed place as fast as our legs could carry us, never looking back. We never spoke of our ordeal to anyone, for fear of being labeled insane. But the nightmares of Hollowbrook Farm still haunt me to this day. I often wonder about the family that once lived there, and what drove them to abandon their home in such haste. Was it the mirror, or something even more sinister that lurked in the depths of that house? I may never know, but one thing is certain. Hollowbrook Farm will forever be a dark, disturbing, and spooky memory that I can never escape.